Interstate rest area and truck stop employees. What's the most bizarre story you have? Not an employee, but a frequent cross-country traveler. Weirdest was pulling up to a truck stop to fill up in southeastern South Dakota during the height of the mayfly hatch. Millions of bugs all over. I started filling up and was getting ready to clean my windshield, and I happened to look over across the way and there was some dude driving a big box truck in the diesel fueling area. He was scraping them off the front of his truck and eating them by the handfuls. The days before cell phones were a thing. Edit to update. Thank you guys so much for the upvotes. It was honestly the single most memorable thing I've ever witnessed in my countless cross-country trips since the late 90s. I just stood there, mouth agape, not believing what I was seeing. And every time I remember it, I'm sad I didn't have a cell phone to record it, because it was just so crazy. I'm sure mayflies are nutritious and I'm not knocking cultures that eat bugs, but mayflies smell like fish fesses to me, and eating them straight off the front of your car is just extra special. Years ago when I was a kid, we were traveling with my mum, her best friend and my sisters. We were pretty tired and pulled into a truck stop for some food and bathroom break. We walk in, my mum asks a guy where the bathrooms were, he points us in the right direction and off we toddle. We come out, take a seat and wait for the waitress to come take our order. She seems to be taking a while, but we figure she's probably busy and will come when she can. Eventually she comes over and tells my mum that everything is okay and the police are on their way. My mum, pretty confused, asks her what she means. Well, turns out we had walked into the middle of an armed robbery and my mum had actually asked the robber where the toilets were. I worked at a gas station truck stop for over a year in high school. I have lots of stories. So, one time I'm closing up the station. I was starting to count the till before I turn on the security system and leave. I've got a wad of 20s when 4 cop cars come ripping into our lot. I run to the windows. 2 cops go to the back and the other 2 position at the corners where it's hard to see them through the windows. Now, I'm an idiot high schooler, so I'm trying to look out the window grasping $300 in 20s. When I realize they've got weapons drawn and are trying to look at me, I put my hands up, cash in hand, and start yelling that I'm an employee. They let me unlock the door and come in. They were nice but clearly frustrated that I set off the alarm. I tell them 4-5 times that the alarm was not set, but they insist that I'm wrong and that they had a clear security report. So I took them to the panel, verified it was off. Then my smarts kick in. Hey guys, what address was the alarm for? Double quote. 303 Baker. Why? Double quote. That's not our address. That's ABC Supplier Block North. They moved quickly to that business. I heard later that the safe was taken from that supply store. I worked at a weigh station for big rigs. There were 2 of us at the station working nights waiting for trucks to pull onto the scale. If anything weighing more than a pound got on the scale, it would send an audible beep into the booth and light up the computers. If it wasn't a trucks, then most of the time it would be the wildlife wandering out onto the scale, which we would ignore, then quickly go back to watching Netflix or whatever. One night though, it was something weighing 132 pounds. We couldn't see it from the windows, but checking the cameras we noticed it was a hunched over naked man shaking like a shitting dog and scratching the side of his face. While my co-worker radioed for the state troopers, I used the intercom to tell him to get off of the scale. Instead he lurched on over and began licking the window. He did this until he was checked out by EMS and taken away by law enforcement for public intoxication. It was later discovered he was using meth. I managed a truck stop an hour east of Winnipeg in the late 90s. This was around the time that Western Star came out with their one-way full window bunk. We had a regular base of clientele that would stop both ways. Surprised to know one of the regulars became enamored with one of the waitresses. She had complained to me about this driver 2 weeks before, and I assured her I would deal with it if he continued to make her uncomfortable. On his return trip he stopped in. I watched. Saw nothing untoward. He ate and then left for his truck. As the Western Star full window bunk has been mentioned, he was parked right in front of the restaurant's bay window. I am back in the kitchen helping with prep and I hear my name called and then I hear my name called. I walk out. Look out the window and see the sun hitting the bunk window of this truck at just the right angle to witness this dude yanking on his wiener so fking hard that I thought he was going to rip it off. All the while he's staring straight at the waitress through the window of the restaurant. Before I could react he realized that we could see him. Jumped in the saddle. Pants around his ankles and hightailed it onto the highway. I think he must have grabbed 5 gears inside 20 feet getting it going. We never saw him again. Overnight shift supervisor 15 years ago. On Valentine's Day. Then 18 years old. I was the only lonely moth king shift supervisor to be able to work second shift at MCD's rest area because, again, lonely with no date. I'm half asleep working the shift. Guy comes in high as a kite. Actually he's higher than kites can go. He orders his food and leaves. An hour later, my cleaning guy, we'll call him Pedro, tells me there's a guy on the toilet that won't come out. We go in. Keep knocking and we're thinking he's sleeping on the shitter. We can see his pants around his ankles. And he's leaning down. While I go call the cops. I tell my cleaning guy to block the bathroom so no one goes into that part of it. There's 2 sides to the bathroom. Pedro comes out and tells me the guy is purple and dead. On the shitter. He overdosed on something. Not sure what. The kicker is that Pedro decided it was in his best interest to run the guy's pockets before the cops show up, which is how he found out the guy was dead. Pedro took the guy's stash and money before leaving. I found out a week later as I overheard it through the crew talking. Fun times at that place. Felt bad for the guy. I wouldn't want to go out that way. Not me. But my dad managed a truck stop for a year or so. At this truck stop drivers could get a shower. But it's timed since there are usually multiple people waiting to get one as well. One day a guy is showering and his time is up. But he didn't come out. One of the employees knocked and requested he come out so the next person could shower. But still no response. They eventually entered the shower to find the man dead. It turned out that he had suffered a major heart attack while he was in there. Another one. And apparently this is somewhat common. A truck transporting honeybees left the stop. But the queen from one of the hives had taken residence in or around the pump while the truck was stopped. They had to get a beekeeper out to capture and move the queen and her colony before they could let anyone near the fuel pumps. I'm not an employee but I once witnessed a squirrel run into the women's room. It was one of those outdoor rest area bathrooms with no door that you turn into the building around a corner, and then like 20 women come out running for their lives and screaming 10 seconds later. It was like something out of a movie. I was at an amusement park once, waiting for my brother to get off a ride. The bench I was sitting on was opposite a convenience store type thing that had an open door and sold snacks, souvenirs, etc. Anyway, a squirrel goes stealthily into the store, steals a bag of peanut M&Ms, then runs with the bag in its mouth onto a high branch in a tree next to the store. It rips open the bag and starts shucking off the chocolate part, then eating the peanuts. That in itself was nuts. Oof. But watching the people sitting below the tree branch who had random chocolate bits landing on them was even funnier. Not an employee. But once at a rest stop in North Carolina, a dude came up to me and asked me for gas money. This was his 2003. And I was driving a 1994 Saturn. He said, "Hey, man. I can tell by your car you don't have a lot of money. But can you spare a couple of bucks for gas?" Double quote. Hey. Fuck you. Man. I didn't give him any money. Not an employee but I worked in a customer service call center for about 4 years and every few months this man in California, if I remember right, would call and ask for coupons. Happens all the time. But every time he'd ask where we were located. When I'd say Iowa, he'd go on and on about how beautiful the rest areas are in Iowa. I mean profusely complimenting our rest stops. I always got a weird vibe over the phone and wondered if he was a serial killer picking up victims at rest areas. But to my knowledge he just really enjoyed them apparently. Editing to add. I don't believe he was a truck driver. If I remember correctly, He drove cross country once in the 90s, if not earlier. A friend of mine had an aunt that got murdered at a rest stop in northern Illinois. Dude had killed his boss or coworker. I'm not sure which one. But then went on the run. Waited at the rest stop. When she went in, he killed her and stole her car and took off. I don't remember the outcome. But he was found. I don't know the outcome. But here's the outcome. Double quote. Worked at a gas station while I was in college. My manager was just a few years older than me and kind of a flirt. We're just casually chatting one day and he comes across a pile of fecal matter in front of the soda fountain. He asks me why I let someone bring their pet into the store. This was before service dogs were common. I said that I didn't see any pets. He volunteered to pick it up, so I thought I would help by retrieving paper towels from the ladies' room. Returning with the paper towels, my nose matches the smell of the ladies' room with the pile on the floor as I eerily utter, "That ain't dog poop." Best I can tell. An older lady, still in bathroom stall, pooped her pants and it just sort of rolled out as she crossed the store. The worst incident I ever saw. Coworker asked if I had any ideas how to flush a turd in the toilet. I was kind of flabbergasted by his question, so I told him break it up with the plunger and get it down. He said he had tried just that and it wouldn't break, so I honestly, against my better judgment, had to see for myself. Fucking turd was about twice as big around as a soda can and about 8 inches long and as hard as a f-king rock. My question is this. How the FCK didn't we see the guy walking out? I mean seriously, that had to have ripped something and made him bleed. Still to this day that image haunts me to the core. I worked nights at a gas station. Had a regular that would come in once a week. He'd buy a microwave burger, 2 energy drinks, and a handful of porno mags. Were the energy drinks for before or after? The most disturbing part was that he paid with his dental practice credit card. I could never get the image out of my head of him shotgunning the energy drinks, furiously masturbating to all those mags, then sticking his fingers in unsuspecting patients' mouths. I worked at a truck stop once and got a call over my earpiece from maintenance saying they found something bad at one of the diesel pumps. I asked what it was and he said he'd have to send a picture because he didn't believe it. It was a huge thick black dildo, just sitting on the pump. I walked in on a midget getting choked like a rag doll. Never had such adrenaline in my body ever. I am not an employee, but once at a rest stop I parked and exited my car to have a woman approach me and start screaming in my face that I stole her pet turtle when she wasn't looking a few miles back up the road, and that she had followed me to get it back. I was completely confused and didn't know what to say but really had to pee. So I went inside and did. When I came back out she was gone, but my car was covered in napkins with writing on them I couldn't read. I never saw her again. I have made a lot of drives alone around the US in my car. As a female who is hyper aware of shitty things, I am super extra cautious about where I choose to stop. However, when nature comes knocking on my bladder door, sometimes I had to stop. Sketchiest truck stops? Somewhere down along the 1-10 between Tucson and El Paso, Texas Panhandle, and OK2. The combination of fluorescent lights flickering and the geographic isolation sure made me hightail it out of there. Edit. Geography. Pretty sure that's the I-10. I got pulled over for doing 120 near the Continental Divide in New Mexico on that road. In high school I worked as a fuel attendant at a truck stop. It wasn't unusual to see drivers at that time high on speed. At any rate, for the fuel ticket, I am filling up the passenger side tank. And this little person, maybe 4 feet tall, comes around the front of his Peterbilt clearly tweaking and had evidently decided he's waited long enough. He pulled the dispenser out of the tank and tossed it on the ground, still locked on pumping diesel. Not shocking, but always remembered it. Big trucker climbs out of his semi-truck cab, turns around petting and talking to something, saying now you be good and protect the truck. A chicken jumps onto his dashboard. I used to work at a gas station quite close to the city, and a lot of tourists came in high as fuck. One guy even lost his keys inside. He found them in the freezer next to the ice cream. I don't work at a rest stop, but I do have a story. I was at a really dirty rest stop. It looked like it hadn't been cleaned in a few months. The restroom was caked in piss. There wasn't any paper towels. And the hand dryers didn't work. It was one of those places where it was so dirty that you could get infected with a couple of new diseases that haven't been discovered yet just by thinking about it. I saw someone walk barefoot with open sores on his feet. I have so many. We had a guy come in with 4 stab marks to his chest and all he wanted to do was call his mom. We called the cops for him and it turned out that his girlfriend had stabbed him. When the cops showed up they told him to just go home. One of my co-workers had a gun pulled on him because he opened a can of soda and it made a loud pop that it scared the customer. Had this person accidentally put their car in drive instead of reverse and they drove into the store. The power went out in the store and as protocol we have to evacuate when that happens. We had a customer screaming at the top of her lungs that we were trying to sexually assault her when we tried to get her to leave the store. A semi-truck driver drove over 2 of our gas pumps because she couldn't turn correctly and then she fled the scene. Gas was literally spilling everywhere. Luckily we caught it all on video so we were able to contact her company and get her to take responsibility for the damages. This chick named Large Marge came in and asked me if I wanted a ride home so I get in the truck with her. When we got to my stop she looked at me and her face turned into a claymation of her eyes bugging out and get mouth elongating. Edit. Then she turned back to normal and told me, "Large Marge brought you home." Not an employee. But back in the 90s when phone booths were a thing. My mom pulled into a truck stop to make a call. I decided to check out the phone booth next to her. Only to find it was full of Polaroids. Being a curious kid, I grabbed one that happened to be by the phone and looked. It was basically a Polaroid DCK pic. I didn't look at the rest. The good old printed dick pic. A classic. My stepfather was a correctional officer who was transporting prisoners from facility to facility 20 years ago when the bus stopped at a rest stop. During a sweep of the bathroom he found a flip phone. He secured it and processed the inmates in and out of the can when the phone rang. The phone's owner identified himself as Chuck Mangione and asked if they could meet up at the next throughway exit and they did. MR. Mangione got his phone back. My mom. Her ex-boyfriend and I lived at a house directly next to a rest area because they worked there and I guess the house came as a package deal since we were so far away from everything. I was around 6 or 7 and would used to adventure around it every day and find some neat stuff people had left behind for however long. I remember that one day my mom was coming to get me and I was near the dumpsters. And she stopped right in front of them taken aback because she had smelled something so foul, more foul than usual, that she immediately just told me to go into the house without even looking. She didn't tell me until I was in high school that they had found dismembered body parts in there, as well as scattered around the rest area once they investigated further. I'm really glad I didn't find anything myself. I worked at a mini Dairy Queen in the truck stop as we all got robbed at gunpoint. I feel like the story is pretty self-explanatory. There were no customers in at the time. This guy walks in with some pistol I couldn't tell ya the name of, waving it around like a foam finger. Tells me to empty the register of all the paper money. I stood there blankly, completely unsure of what to do. I politely inform him there's no way for me to open the register without a supervisor code and I just made minimum wage. He calls me a f-king dumbus and tells me to ring up a Blizzard or something and hit cash. I said oh. Okay. He collected his payment from the mini Wendy's and the convenience portion and just f-ked off. The cops took notes but a fake there was no follow up. It was only like $350. The gas station part probably had more to offer. Anyway, I quit like a month after that. My mate told me a story from when she used to work graveyard shifts at a 24/7 McDonald's off a motorway. She used to watch the trucks drive by at night when on break, but one night she saw a person walk onto the median strip on the motorway. This person wore all black so it was hard for her to see them, but she said she could make out something strung over their shoulder as they crossed the road. My mate watched as this person proceeded to throw this long object over the roadway in front of a car where their tires burst after driving over it. She ran into the store and called the police, and it was lucky because there was a police car driving up the motorway towards the store about 1 kilometer away. She told me that the person was found with a 13-inch kitchen knife, and she thinks if she didn't see this person they were probably trying to carjack people or worse by forcing them to pull over. Obligatory not a gas station employee, but I did sit at a gas station off 55 in the Missouri Bootheel for several hours waiting for a tow on my broke down car. A guy walks in with luggage. The guy bringing him is younger than him and hugs him, and they do what looks like some kind of prayer holding hands, or I'm not sure really. It lasts a few moments. The younger guy leaves. The guy then sits at the subway with all his bags, and a bigger trucker guy comes up. I can't hear the conversation, but they disappear for a hot minute, leaving all his luggage there, then come back and order food. He then sits there with the guy for like an hour or more. Then I left, so I don't know what happened. I'm struggling to remember now, but the guy might have had dog tags on. Still have no idea what I witnessed. When I was in college, one of my relatives hooked me up with a job over Christmas break as the overnight custodian at a rest stop on the Interstate. It was easy money. I would sit in the office from midnight to 8 AM and read books and play Game Boy. I only had to come out, it locked, to check the cleanliness of the place once an hour. Anyway, the story of gay roadside hookups is so true. This was in the mid-90s, way before the internet. I had a peephole in my office that looked out into the lobby. All night. Dudes just hanging out waiting for other dudes. I assume they went back to their cars after meeting because no funny business actually happened in the lobby or restrooms that I am aware of. Anyway, long story short, I would spend hours looking out my peephole watching gay dudes cruise for other gay dudes. Fun times. There was one instance where I was working one night and this family of 4 or 5 came in. Adult kids with aging parents. They milled about the store, used the bathroom and whatnot, and were getting ready to leave when the mom came up to my counter. Ghost Riders by Johnny Cash had been playing on the loudspeaker for a few minutes. She looks me in the face and says, "I was just in the bathroom." And you know the part in this song where he goes GHOO Austria I das I in the sky? I was in the bathroom stall, and during that part I could swear I heard something move in the stall next to me. But I was in there alone. I think it was the ghost of Johnny Cash. Double quote. All I could think was this lady has seen Walk the Line too many times or something. I was honestly just dumbfounded. Edit. Typo. I'm not an employee, but I'm on the road quite a bit. Been propositioned a couple times. Always in Utah of all places. I thought to myself last week, I bet I'm the only guy on the road traveling this highway right now with birds. Next truck stop. Guy filling up next to me is also traveling with birds. I tend to drive at night and early morning, so maybe more interesting stuff happens during the day. I had 2 dudes come in during my early morning shift. They come straight up to the till and say, "Give me all your money." I'm still not sure if they were joking. But at the time my response was, "No." Double quote. They looked at each other and the one who spoke before shrugs and goes, "Alright then." Laughs with his buddy and leaves without purchasing anything. Not really scary or anything. Just really confusing because they literally didn't buy anything. Not diesel, gas, or food in the store itself. I worked at a truck stop in East Tennessee for a summer. We kept getting reports of a lot lizard, a prostitute that works truckers, but we could never catch her. Turned out, the lot lizard was one of our employees. And her madam was another one who would sit in her car with a CB radio on her brakes setting up the meetings. The girl in question was in East Tennessee 8, which probably translates to a big city 3. Not an employee, but one of my favorite stories I've gathered in a long life comes from a truck stop. Another soldier in my platoon was a truck driver before he joined the army, and my favorite story he told me was when he was parked across from a line of trucks at a truck stop in the Midwest. He watched a lot lizard, truck stop prostitute, jump out of one guy's truck and walk over to a mud puddle where she squatted over it and proceeded to wash herself for about 10 seconds. Then headed over to the next guy's truck and jumped in. About 15 minutes later she did the same thing. He sat there eating his truck stop dinner, watching her work her way all the way down the line. All the while using the same mud puddle in between each truck. To this day I don't know why, but that image is so vivid of her squatting over that mud puddle. Worked night shift at a truck stop in eastern Quebec in the early 90s. Tiny place around 25W x 25 feet D. Little section for the cash and oil product on shelves on slat walls. 2 truckers, male, come in and ask for a shower. They both pay and go to it. The showers are right behind the wall with the shelves of oil and things. Within 2-3 minutes the banging against the wall got so intense the shelves literally fell to the floor. When they came out afterwards I asked them if the shower went well and politely asked for help to pick up the shelves. Which they did. I worked at a Dunkin' Donuts at a rest stop when I was in high school. One Saturday I worked a 8-hour overnight and during my meal break I went outside to have a smoke. Instead of staying right by the back door I went over to some picnic tables. As I walked over there I noticed faint lights in the woods. I walked closer and saw 6 guys with their dicks out surrounding a naked chubby middle-aged woman and a naked fat guy. Not an employee, just a cross-country trucker. I was making a long trip down to Florida to do a pickup. I started the journey somewhere in southern Ontario in Toronto, and I don't know if this counts, but at the border getting inspected when I see there's some kind of scuffle going on with another driver, and you should have seen it. This dude was very poorly using MMA moves on the border patrolman. After he got tasered, the border patrolmen took what looked like water jugs and a couple bags of weed, which I thought was them confiscating some kind of alcoholic beverage. Apparently it was pure water, which if you didn't know is illegal to take from Canada. So yeah, I watched a guy get arrested for attempting to smuggle water and weed at the border. I have another story from the same trip about a Karen and another about Florida man. I'll tell them both for a couple of updates. I worked for a long haul trucking company 20 years ago. The story I heard from the VP recruiting driver management was a driver had got some lot lizards who also had some hot needles, meth maybe, and when he refused to pay they shot him with an overdose of it and he died. Now, this was somewhere in Southern California in the summer. And before GPS. The driver was in the truck for 2 weeks until the heat and time caused him to swell and finally burst, leaking out the side of the truck. Cops were called. Investigation done. Etc. They had to send a guy down there to get the truck, try to get it cleaned, and drive it back the 1,200 miles to the main terminal. They said the guy they sent was a bit off himself and would eat and drink in the truck while the windows were down trying to air it out.